Hello everybody, welcome to another Figma tutorial. Today we're going to be talking briefly about Boolean operations in Figma, and this is going to be a short one. I have a lot on my plate this week. I'm doing a design sprint and I just finished up day 2. However, there's some research that I would like to perform, sort of extracurricular work, a little bit of homework to make sure that I'm going to be rolling along smoothly for the remainder of the design sprint. And so I don't intend on making this very long. However, I know that I always say that, and it rarely ends up being the case. And so, as I said, we'll be looking at the Boolean operations in Figma, and I'll give an example of how each of them work, of course, and I'll share some tips and tricks, and then we might make some cool, fun icons just to show how powerful this tool can be. And I did install a little bit of software, so hopefully whenever I type a key, it might show up on the desktop, or it might show up in your view. We'll see there. I'll try to move this somewhere where it'll be a little bit easier to see. Let's do a test here. See how that comes up. Excellent. All right, so it's not exactly centered, but that would indicate the keys that I'm pressing, because I love my keyboard shortcuts, of course, and I did turn on a little animation whenever I tap or click the mouse. A sort of a dark circle should appear where I'm tapping, and so that makes my actions a bit more clear. Okay. And so to begin, what are Boolean operations? Well, as it says in the subhead here, they are formulas used to combine shape layers in different ways. And as you can tell, I have 8 different shape layers, and I've organized them here in the layers panel. We have, rectangle 1 goes with ellipse 1, rectangle 2 goes with ellipse 2, so on and so forth, and that's left to right. And of course, for ease of understanding, I have placed the rectangle layers on top of the ellipse layers. And to begin with, how do we access, how do we find the Boolean operations? Well, they're not going to appear in this options area right here where you can rename your file. That's where the shortcut is located. But as you can tell, I have no layers selected, and so it just gives me the option to rename the file or do some file level options. And so in order to get the Boolean options to appear, we will need to, Boolean operations options, I should say, we need to have at least 2 shape layers combined. And so you'll notice that if I select just the ellipse, for example, we get the shape options up here, which of course we can edit the object, create a component, or use a mask. However, you'll notice when I select 2 shapes, we get a different option up here, and this drop down right here, if you click on that, these are all the different Boolean selections, the Boolean operations we can use, as well as that's where they stuck the flatten selection option. We discussed that in a much earlier video, and I won't go over how flatten selection works today. However, if you are going to be creating some icons, you should know that when you're creating icons and sort of when you're getting ready to hand off any vector work to your developer team or what have you, you'll need to flatten it and then of course do an outline. But we will not going to worry about that today. And so let's see here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to concentrate on the first operation. It's one of 4, as you can see up here. Oops, sorry. There we go. Let's select some shapes. And there are 4 different operations: the union selection, subtract selection, intersect, and exclude. And a way to think about these, or this is sometimes helpful, and you may already be familiar with your Boolean operations, your Boolean selection types. If you've been a long-time user of some of the Creative Cloud apps, such as Illustrator, Photoshop, they all feature Boolean operations. It's quite a common sight when you are working with tools that create and edit vectors, which of course is basically what Figma is based around. Everything's a vector, as it should be. And so, and you can only, well, that's not true. As I'll say, you could probably do a selection on a raster image as well. But that is irrelevant. So if we select before I forget, sorry, I'm shooting from the hip here. Before we forget, one way to conceptualize how these work is union and subtract. These two are opposites of each other. And intersect and exclude are opposites of each other. So union select opposites, intersect and exclude opposites. And I'll show you what that looks like momentarily. And so I have rectangle 1 and ellipse 1 selected. I have the two layers selected, as you can see in the layers panel. And I will perform a union selection. But before I do that, go ahead and think for a moment. What do you suspect that is going to look like? What will be the outcome? And there are two hints available on the screen. The first one is the icon here for the union selection. That'll give you a bit of an indication of what's going to happen. And there's also the text at the bottom of the screen here, which states the Boolean group shape will take on the appearance, that is to say the fill, the stroke, and any effects that may be applied of the top layer. And so let's, in almost all cases. And so once you have an idea of what you think the union of rectangle 1 and ellipse 1 will look like, I'll give you another second to think about that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and apply this selection. And when I click, watch the two layers in the layers panel and see if you can tell what happens to them there. So click. Okay, so first things first. When I told Figma to run the operation, it took the two shapes and it put them in a group. It gave an icon to the group, which is sort of a miniaturized version of what the operation ended up with. And it also named the group after the operation type, after the selection. And so I chose a Boolean operation of type union, and it named it union. And as you can see, it did not flatten the two together. It made a composite shape, that is to say, it made a shape group, which is why we have this drop-down arrow here. We have this caret. However, this is a non-destructive action, and what I mean by that is we can still select each individual shape and move it around as we please. It didn't combine them in any irreversible way, like say, converting to an outline stroke would do. And so, as we can see here, I'll go back a few steps. So, as we can see here, what I have written at the bottom is certainly true for the union operation. That is to say, hierarchically speaking, the rectangle is, and I guess visually speaking as well, the rectangle is on top of the ellipse. So when both are selected, because we're running a union, or because we're running any type really, the ellipse is going to take on the appearance, the fill stroke, and the effect of the top layer. Now, the only sort of appearance parameter that we have going on with our rectangle is a fill, which has this hex value right here. However, what if we want to, let's test this out a bit. Let's give it some more, let's give it, let's enhance the appearance a little bit of our rectangle here. So I'll go ahead and click that, and I think let's give it a stroke. We'll go ahead and give it a stroke. And we have a default stroke of course, pure black. I'm gonna bring the stroke width up a little bit, and let's see here. Let's do that. Okay, and so knowing what we know, that is to say, once these are combined via the Boolean operation, the Boolean selection, what do we think is going to happen? So we know what it looks like when there's no stroke applied, but let's take a look at what happens when we have a stroke applied to the topmost, or the layer on top, that is to say the rectangle. So let's go ahead and run a Boolean operation there, and yeah, as expected, our new shape, sort of the composite of the two, the addition of those two together, has resulted in a fun-looking shape here that has all the appearances so far that we've given it of the top layer. And of course, we could actually, I want to continue doing that. There we go. We could go a bit further, and we can give it effect. Let's give it a drop shadow. I'm going to go ahead and make that a bit more obvious. And so let's go ahead and let me scrub in a value here. Give it 30, 30, and a blur of 16. Do I want to spread? Not really. Okay, so let's give it that, and I'll give it an opacity of 50%. Okay, and so we have multiple appearance options going on here with our rectangle. We have a fill, we have a stroke, and we have a drop shadow. And so a lot of activity going on with our rectangle. And so we'll select both of these shape layers, and once again I will give it the union selection. And there we go. We now have sort of a single shape, so to speak, not flattened, non-destructive, of course, that has the stroke, fill, and the drop shadow styles, all that were applied to rectangle 1, which was on top. And so I'll just Command Z. I'm sorry if those letters are distracting. I'm going to Command Z my way out of this. I'll just get rid of the stroke this way. Okay, and as you can see, that is how you make a, that is what happens when you get, or when you perform a union operation, a union selection in Figma. And it's going to be the same in any of your vector editing software, any of your vector editing apps. It'll have the same effect. The math is the same across the board. And another way to think of union, or sort of a synonym for union, is addition. And so you're adding these two together, and again, whatever is on top is going to the styles of the shape on top will dictate what the shape on bottom will adopt. Okay, let's talk about subtract, which subtraction, I can think of a better word for that. Maybe difference. That's a more mathematical term there, or arithmetic term. So if we select these two, and I'm about to do the subtract selection. Okay, what do we think is going to happen here? And so we're going to subtract in a way to think about this, if I'm not incorrect, is the top layer is the one that does the acting, so to speak. So the top layer is going to be subtracted from the bottom layer. And so what do we think that's going to look like? Well, we can get and you'll begin to see a theme here. If you look at the icon, okay, next to the left of the text subtract selection here in the options panel at the top, well, what does the icon tell us for union? And compare that with what we just saw when we ran the union operation, how it sort of combined the two together, and how that relates to the icon here. Okay, well, based solely on the icon, what do we think is going to happen when we run a subtract operation? Well, just based on the icon alone and the name, again, these are all named appropriately, I would say that our result is going to be a circle with about 25% of it cut out. And so let's test that and see what we get. Okay, and interestingly, it looks like the shape we have left over here does not take on the appearance, that is to say the fill, the stroke, the effect of the top layer. Well, that's because this operation really only affects the top layer. It doesn't affect I'm phrasing this poorly. In any event, that is what is occurring. You're subtracting the top from the bottom, and so yes, that is still true. And so, as you can see, these two are opposites. This union operation adds these two together. Subtract subtracts the top from the bottom. Another way to think about this is union adds the top to the bottom. Subtract removes the top from the bottom. All right. Well, let's consider this other pair, this other set we have here. We have intersect and exclude. And so we'll do what we were doing before, and I'll do the drop down. And again, based solely on the icon and the name, because again, the names are very indicative, what do we expect would happen if we ran the intersect selection? Well, it looks like we're going to be left with just a little bit of a slice like this area right here, this sort of 25% or 1/4 of the ellipse down here. That looks like the only thing that's going to remain, in that the only the shape's appearance is going to be where those two shapes, that is rectangle 3 and ellipse 3, where they intersect. Ahaha, that's what we're going to be left with. And so we'll go ahead and tap that. And indeed, that is what we are left with. And of course, as stated earlier, this is a Boolean operations are non-destructive. So if we wanted to, we can continue to move around our shapes, and because they are in this sort of Boolean selection group, they still have the operation, the math active, and so that's why you can move it around and see what we're seeing here. And let's see here. Actually, I want to do this right quick. We'll do that. I'll leave those the way they look after. Okay, and let's see here. So the last one is exclude. And and of course, this sort of subtext I wrote here. So shared between those two shapes, this little portion right here, the quarter of the circle, was the only part that overlapped. That's to say that that's where those two shapes, rectangle 3 and ellipse 3, that's where they overlapped. They shared that space. That's where they intersected, and so that's what we're left with. Now, we know that, well, union and subtract, those are opposites, and intersect and exclude, these are opposites in what they do. And so we know what we ended up with here. So what do we expect to be the result of running an exclude selection on these two layer shapes, that is rectangle 4 and ellipse 4? Well, again, I would say look to the iconography. And if it's, I've been pointing that out over and over because years ago, for the longest time, I did not understand which Boolean operation I needed to perform for some of my designs. I knew roughly, if I had an idea in mind of how I wanted a vector to look, I knew that Boolean operations came into play somewhere, but I never knew which one to choose. And what I would usually end up doing is I would select my shapes, and I would just go through the list until, and if I didn't like the result, I would just Command Z or Control Z my way out of it, and then try the next one and the next one and the next one until I got what I wanted. But again, that was that was years ago, so do forgive me. Knowing goes without saying, but knowing how they work ahead of time, that's just going to save you a lot of time and energy with your projects, and it will make your workflow a lot more efficient and a lot quicker. And of course, once you know what you're talking about as far as Boolean operations are concerned, you will be able to communicate this to other designers and other people on your team, and so you'll be speaking the same language, which of course has great value. And of course, me being the dummy I was back then, if I had just looked at the iconography, it would have told me what's going on. And so, when you have your two shapes selected, and of course you can run this with more than two, and you can do Booleans on top of Booleans if you so choose to. What you see that's in white, like this tiny little square here in the middle, these two shapes right here, this shape here, and then this sort of the addition of both the squares. What's in white is what's going to be left over, and what's in black with the tiny white stroke here, at least that's how it looks in Figma, that's going to be what is removed. And so when we exclude these two shape layers, it's just that. Where the intersection is, that's what's excluded. That is what's taken away, and we're left with the area that had no overlap. And of course, since this is non-destructive, we can move these shapes around as we see fit, because the math is still active that's giving them these attributes. And so that is how Boolean operations work in Figma. So the question is, well, what can we do with that? And there are more answers to that question than there are stars in the sky, of course. However, a good example of what you can do with this is, of course, make basic shapes. And that may go without saying, but I did want to voice that. And so what we can do, and I'll just sort of scroll over a little bit to the right here, is we can practice making some basic shapes. And I'll make a couple to give you an idea of what you can do. And of course, this is just a very simple example of the types of shapes that you can create, and let your imagination go wild. And so let's say we wanted to create a moon shape, possibly something like a crescent moon, or something along those lines. And so, well, that should be simple enough. We can start with let's start with two ellipses. And let's see here, I want to go ahead and make those just a little bit larger. And let's give them something like that, a nice color like that. Okay, and actually I'm going to slightly change the color on that one. Okay, let's see here. And I'll line these up to where it's sort of like the MasterCard logo, so to speak. And I want the top layer in this case is called ellipse 6. I want that on top. And what sort of operation? If I want just this sliver here left over, that is to say, the one that's in the dark blue, what sort of operation do you suspect I would need to run? What type of Boolean operation would I need to run if I wanted to end up with just that sliver of the dark blue? Well, it sounds like it would be the subtract selection. And so let's go ahead and run that. And indeed it is. And of course I know that because the word subtract makes sense in this context. I'm subtracting the top from the bottom, but also again, the iconography here shows me what I'm going to be left with. And so there we go. I have a moon shape there. And of course I can give it a little bit of corner radius, which of course is not going to really affect anything, not terribly affect anything that you see along this arc here, but it is going to change the corner radius here. And so you can see as I scrub back and forth, we have an alteration there. And so that's how we would make a moon. And let's see here, what else can we make? Let's see here. Okay, let's see if we can make a gear. And so, let's see here, I did not mean my slice tool, that's not what I meant. Excuse me. Oh yeah, I pressed S thinking it was going to give me star. I should have known it was slice. And I suspect more people use star than slice, maybe not, so I kind of wish they would switch that around. Maybe I have the power to do that in my desktop Figma, but I'm not sure. And so, let's see here. How would we make, I kind of gave it away, how would we make a gear? For example, if we wanted to make a settings icon, which is sort of similar to what you see on a mobile device, how would we make a gear? Okay, well, what parts of what are the parts of a gear? Well, we have the central ellipse portion with sort of a hole cut out, and the gear also has teeth. And so I think we'll start with the toothy portion first. So we can go ahead, and I selected the star shape, and if we go ahead and click star, or click one down in the canvas, I'll go ahead and make this a bit larger. Oh, I didn't mean to do that, but it looks like we have sort of a night sky theme going on here so far. So when I lay down the star into the canvas, and let's make that a little darker there, we have some handles here that appear on the shape that we can perform various actions with. And so where these two lines meet in one of the corners of the star here, and we see that the ratio is 38.2, which makes it has these this line the way it is. If we move this in and out, we can change the appearance of the star. And so that's how we do that. And let's see, I want to leave it where it was, and I don't think I'm going to do, whoop, there we go, anything to the radius. And it looks like here, if I click here, this handle, that's sort of like a, that's your corner radius. That's what that handle is for. And as we can see, when I'm moving this up and down, if you look at the right-hand side in the design panel, the corner radius, which is this area right here, when I move this, when I move this in and out, it responds. And so that's your corner radius. And then this handle right here, this is the count, which, let's see here, that is the count handle. And so if I click and, can't click. If I click and drag this, it adds points to the star. And so that's very, very handy, and is one of the first steps with making some very, very cool shapes. And so I think what I'm going to do is, let's see here, I want a gear with many teeth. And so I'll do something like count of, let's see here, we'll do 16. And the teeth on a gear really aren't this long, of course. They're kind of short and stubby. And so I will change the ratio, and this is sort of this is how you would end up with an icon that looks like a sticker that might say wow, or #1 dad, or have a sale price on it or something like that. This is how you would get to this point. And again, that is adjusting the number of points on the star using the star shape tool, and then of course adjusting the ratio closer. The closer you get to 100, you are approaching something that's more spherical. However, you can clearly see all the different faces around here, make this not a perfect sphere. And so I'm going to do something like that. Yeah, something like that. And then let's see, I'll go ahead and change the, let's see here, change the ratio a little bit. Okay, and maybe I'll knock that count down just a bit there. Yeah, something like that. All right, I kind of have the first part of my gear, and I want to put a hole here where it would fit onto a rod or some other component of a machine, if we're thinking sort of in a skeuomorphic sense. And so I will, let's see here, I'll put an ellipse, and we'll notice that this ellipse, of course, we can see it on top of this star shape here, and of course it is, ellipse 7 is on top of star 1. And so I'm going to hold down Shift and Option so I can click and drag this and maintain, which adjusts the width and the height at the same point, at the same time, to keep them nice and even. And so that looks good. And let's see here, I will select the two of them, and again we'll do a subtract, and we can see that the middle part there, as we can see the moon behind it, is, ooh, that's almost sort of 3D looking, very cool. We can tell that it's transparent right here. And so that's how we would make a gear icon. Of course, you might say, well, that's all well and fine, but gears don't have, the teeth aren't exactly, very curvy like this at the end, which I would argue that in fact some do, but right you are. And so I can come back to, I can take a look at my subtract layer, I can select the star, and of course, again, non-destructive, I can change the radius on the points here. I can still adjust the ratio in case I wanted to make something interesting like that. Almost looks sort of flowery, or sort of floral, I should say. Or I can make any number of things here. Actually, that seems like a good way to make a bunch of flower type icons. And in any event, let's see here, let's bump that up a little bit, and I like my count where it is. Okay, well, let's see here. If I wanted to sort of, one thing I could do is, let's see here. Let's go ahead and select my star. Count's fine. Ratio, yeah, that's looking pretty good. Well, I can either get super points, or I can just get very, very knobby teeth on here. So one thing that we can do, which won't solve all of our problems, but at least will get us very, very close, is what we're doing, close to what we want, is I will go ahead and draw another ellipse, and let's see here. How would I do this? Okay, I want it centered to there. Okay, and I will select that. And what I want to end up with is, let's see here. Yep, intersect. And let's run through that again. And so, actually, I'm going to reduce the size on that just a skosh. Alrighty, so I have my gear shape here with this very curvy and wavy sort of radius going on here for the points. But I want a sharper look for my teeth. And so I created another ellipse, and I'm going to align these all together here. Boop, boop, there we go. Okay, and I created another ellipse. Let's get that a different color, something like that. And when I have both of these selected, I could probably make that a bit larger. Actually, let's do that. When I have both shape layers selected, I can see how they overlap. I can see the path, which is sort of this blue line. That's the path of the vector. Excuse me. And so we can do Boolean. We can perform Boolean operations on Boolean groups. It's just Boolean all the way down. And so, because it's non-destructive, we can undo it and play with what it looks like. And so I want to remove, using this top ellipse layer, which is ellipse 8, let's do that to make it cleaner. I want to remove these outside bits. And so, again, I will go here to my Boolean operations dropdown, and I'm thinking about, mathematically, what would this, which one would be correct. I'm thinking this before I go here, so I don't have to spend too much time looking. And I'm also going to rely on the iconography. And let's see here. Well, I don't want to add them together. I don't want I don't want it to look like that. That's not helpful at all. And I definitely don't want to do an exclude selection because while that is kind of a cool shape, again, not what I'm looking for. And then, of course, subtract, again, very interesting looking vector we have here, but not quite what I'm looking for. It's actually intersect. And now we have a gear that, while not exactly a gear that you'd probably see in a factory, because again, we have if I zoom in a bit here, these teeth might be acceptable. However, this tooth is not going to fit in here. There's going to be a lot of grinding going on, and so there are some other options, other operations we can do. However, I don't want to get too deep into this. I want to leave some mystery for you, because it's very fun to, of course, play around with all these things and see what you can come up with. And of course, it's very, with using Boolean operations, it's easy to come up with a bunch of fun shapes. You can easily create a logo this way. And again, since it's non-destructible, you can just, if you make a mistake, you can just Control Z or Command Z your way out of this. And let's see here. Yeah, don't want to do that. And in any event, that is how you would have fun with your shapes and create some interesting design elements for whatever project you're working on, whether it be logo creation or creating your own logo pack is very fun. Very time consuming, of course, but it can be a fun way to come up with some logos. And so that is 2 examples of how to create some shapes using the Boolean operations in Figma. And once again, those are the union and subtract. And of course, to find them, you would select either a Boolean group like this, which includes two shapes, or you would just select 2 shapes. 2 shape layers, and you would see this icon up here. That is the selection drop down, which has all your Boolean operations. And then we have union and subtract. These first 2, they're opposite of each other. And then number 3 and number 4, intersect and exclude. These are opposites of each other. And if you ever forget which one does which, you can look at the iconography, and whatever is in white is what's going to be left over. And so that's a very simple way of thinking about that. And so, as I said, this is going to be a bit of a short one, and so I appreciate you joining me this evening. And of course, I will be back this coming Friday with more fun in Figma fun. And if you have any ideas about anything you'd like to see, have any questions or any concerns about what you're looking at in Figma, anything bothering you, of course, if there's any questions or concerns with the content I've delivered tonight, of course, you can find me on Slack. I'm also available on LinkedIn. And feel free to subscribe to me on Twitch. You can sign up for notifications. You'll get an email whenever I go live. And that should be it for this evening. So have a good one, everybody. I'll see you this Friday.